What excited me tonight, and I wanted to share it with you as soon as I found out, is this new CTF. It's all web based and it's white box as opposed to black box, right? And we know the difference. White box is you get source code, which to me is very similar to like if you're just starting to learn how to lockpick and you got the see-through lock, right? You can see the pins move, you can see what you're doing. It's very similar. Um, and then when you get more advanced, now you get the real thing, and that's black box. And that's where you're poking around blindly and you're studying behavior and maybe verbose error messaging if you're lucky. But a lot of it's, just blindly poking at things and watching for anomalies, right? So I think it's great because I started with black box, and obviously that's probably the deep end. And I really love the white box. I really underestimated it mainly because, when I started, I didn't know a thing about programming. And so it intimidated me. And I thought, well, that's just gobbledygook, right? So what good is it going to do me? But even though I don't know this particular language very well, this is Node.js, by the way. Uh, I know Python okay. Uh, and so there's a lot of similarities. And so, and now we've got Chat GPT to help us along, right? So, anyway, I just felt the power of how this can enhance you. Um, and I just want to show you. I want to show you my methodology and why I'm so excited. So, you can join in the fun. Look at all these people having fun. Yay. You got to bring your own champagne, though. Um, so, you can start, it's free training. It's got to create an account, which I haven't even done. But what's cool is, well, I got to check it out. I could actually poke at their thing, their CTF, without even signing up. So without further ado, let's get into this. So this was CTF number 13, and why I started here is just because this is where I saw the ad on LinkedIn, and I took the Pepsi challenge, and I'm kind of hooked. So this is what they give you. Can you spot the vulnerability? And it's get the list of CRM users from the internal network API. Okay, so we're dealing with Node.js, we're dealing with APIs. You've got Node.js. It might be really intimidating. So let me show you how I break this down. Okay. Now, first of all, they uh, they don't let you copy paste, and maybe that's by design. Um, but here's what I did. As much as I know it sounds like the hard way, I actually retyped this whole thing. I did it in virtual code, which I highly recommend, or some type of code editor. Why? Because uh, it'll make your life so much easier, right? Typing code, you can just run into all sorts of problems, syntax issues. The, what I like about VS Code is it's smart enough to know the syntax of the language because you can start the file right off the bat and it'll just recognize it and it'll help you see like everything is starts to get highlighted and it'll start recognize and help you type and help you fill in things as it recognizes functions and variables as you build it. So it's just so much easier because as you can see, like there's just room for a lot of mistakes here. Okay, but I typed it because it helped me really understand what was going on here. Plus, my overall goal was once I typed it, I was going to select it and I was going to ask my Mr. Robot to help me out. Okay. So this is how I talk to Mr. Robot. Walk me through this code. If I can just type. Okay. This is how I talk to my buddy here. Okay. So I'll tell you, I wanted to show you this because it's turning into my absolute best bud as far as debugging and help me solve really technical coding problems and just asking it silly questions. So let's get to it and look at how excited he is, she. So already recognizes it as Node.js, okay, and Express, great, which we recognize from the Express library there. Okay, it's already look at this thing. It's smart, right? API server, several endpoints. So it's talking about how it's importing the dependencies. Okay, and I'm just going to skim this, but you can see that it sets up two Express.js applications, app 1 and app 2, which we see there, right? So it just assigns them a variable. Express 1, Express 2. That's just instantiating Express servers. Okay, that's how easy it is in that language to do that. Okay. And they'll have two different sets of routes. Then we get the middleware setup. There's a body parser, okay, to parse JSON. We've got environment variables. Okay, and it just goes on and on and on. This is kind of important because if you look at this, it's just this like Regex nightmare, right? But it's setting it up for what we'll see later is a filter. So it's really just filtering on valid UUIDs to make sure this company ID value matches an expected format. Okay, and then we've got the first endpoint, okay, which is a post request, right? So we see that app.post at .get company logo, right? And then it has a little bit of logic here. Okay, so it's validating if company ID is not empty and matches the UUID format. So see how handy this is? I mean, it literally just walks you through the entire code here. Okay, here's another filter, valid URL function. It's a helper function that checks if the URL is either HTTP or HTTPS. Okay, and that's for this next endpoint, right? Because now the other function that we have here at this endpoint, set company logo, is to literally pair a UUID to a image, which it will fetch. Well, we're going to find out where it fetches, but presumably somewhere on the internet because it's using HTTP or S protocols to go get something at a URL. Okay. So now if both of these pass, then it will fetch the content for the provided URL. Notice provided key, because who's providing this? Well, the user is, right? This is all happening on the client side, which is without any other filters. Well, a malicious user could possibly do bad things here, right? Take advantage of this. And so it saves it. So it grabs it and then it saves it as the company logo file. So is that something that could be abused? I'm already thinking about other vulnerabilities that are similar to that, right? You call out to a malicious server under your control, and maybe it has malicious code that it pulls down. Now it's running malicious JavaScript on somebody else's server. Maybe it's a reverse shell. Well, you see where this is going, right? So that is sort of where my mind was going when I started looking at this particular endpoint. Okay, and then there's this CRM users endpoint, which is a GET request. But now that seems like the target, because remember, the overall objective here is to do what? Get the list of CRM users from the internal network API. So where's it internally running is on port 4001 locally. Okay, so this second instance of an Express server is running internally on 4001 at this endpoint, right? So how do we get there, right? So didn't mean to go back to the party here, but so back to walking through this again. So yeah, so what it's what the AI is smart enough to put together already is it sends CRM user data, which sounds exactly what the goal is. Okay, which is sourced from the CRM users module, right? Which is what we see imported uh, as a custom library, if you will, right here. Okay, which is stored in a file called crm.mjs, right? And that's on the present working directory of this server. So that might be another vector or another target we could attempt to attack. Okay. So anyway, I wanted to show you that. That to me was so helpful because again, I don't know how to program in Node.js, but I feel like I can read this, 56 lines of code and I feel fairly comfortable about working with it now. So now, okay, what do we do with all that? Well, what I'd like to do is get Burp going. Okay, good old Burp. So we can poke around a little bit. Okay, start this bad boy up. And I like to use the built-in browser because it keeps it separate and clean. And so let's go out. Let's grab that endpoint, which is here. Actually, it's here. And yeah, let's grab this, plug it in. Actually, yeah, I'm going to plug it into here. Okay, and let's do that again because we can intercept. Okay, so now we have the first request. Okay, and we're trying to get something that cannot be gotten, right? Because look at the script. These are all post endpoints. So what we should be trying to do is sending a post, but that's okay. The important thing is to grab this and send it to repeater. Okay. And now we can play around with this. Now, here's what I like to do. Okay. We're going to send a post request and we are playing with JSON here. So really like I can get rid of pretty much all this stuff here. And what I want to keep, and I realize you're like, well, how do you know about these headers? And all I can say is because I've been practicing. You'll get to know these headers the more you do this. But basically, when we're dealing with JSON, that's the way you can tell Burp and the server, hey, heads up, I'm going to send you a JSON body, okay? Because it's expecting um, a certain format and a certain data delivery. Now, the other important thing, syntax Y in a request, is you always have this blank line, okay? I honestly don't know what that is, other than just it tells the program um, to expect, this is the end of the headers and the start of, I guess, the body. So it's just a syntax thing. Now, the way JSON works, double quotes on your parameters, and then that's really the syntax. And then you just fill in um, a parameter, okay, and then what is expecting. So what are we trying to figure out here? Well, we got to go back to the program and sort of look through the logic here a little bit. So the first bit of it is it's looking for this. Here's a parameter, company ID. Okay. Now it stringifies it. Okay. And that's just so it can do this validation. So it makes sure that company ID is not empty, right? And then also if it matches this regex. Now I know this is again, what the heck is all this? Um, it's actually not as bad as you think, but we're gonna let our robot friend help us out here. But the way you look at this is this little caret is just starts with, and then in the bracket is basically you've got squiggly brackets, which is 8. So it wants the first 8 in this sequence to be 0 to 9 and A through F. That's it. That's what it's filtering on. Then you've got a hyphen in between, a little hyphen. So it's expecting a hyphen. And then the next thing is 4, the same thing. Okay. And then another hyphen. Then this is, I look at each element in the square brackets as, a number in the series. So you got 3 plus 1, if that makes sense. So this first part's got to fall between 0 and 5. And then the next is just like before. It's got to be between 0 and 9, A through F. So it's expecting a 4 digit or a 4 character alphanumeric followed by another hyphen. And it goes on and on and on. So now here's what we can do with Mr. Robot. Okay. We can copy and we can say, please give me an example. Go, typing. Example of input matching this. Okay. And then just give it that. Okay. And look at that. It just knows, right? So this is what we're going to use. This is literally what it's designed to match on. Now, if you want to get into walk me through this, it'll explain exactly what all this regex means. So, feel free to like really double down on your regex because it'll walk you through it. Again, that's the start, carets to start, matches any alphanumeric character. And we kind of went through this a little bit, but see, it just goes through the entire thing. And even the I, what the heck was that silly I at the end? Okay. This is the flag that makes the regular expression case insensitive. Oh, that makes sense. So I for case insensitive. Perfect. So that's what that filter is, and that's why I love Mr. Robot. I mean, look at my prompts. Like, walk me through this. I'm not really being super creative here. That's how advanced this thing has gotten. Okay, so back to the lesson. Now we ferreted that out. We have, I think, the makings of our JSON here. So here, we're going to put what Mr. Robot came up with, because that's the pattern. And then here, we just have to match company ID, right? Was it ID like that? We got to make sure it's, because that is sensitive, case sensitive. Yeah, so company ID just like that. Okay, so I think we're ready, and let's hit it. Okay, so notice it didn't send it because it had to add. Notice what it did is it added one more header, which was really nice. This is a smart feature in Burp. My post request was not complete. It was not ready because we needed one more header, content length. It always needs to do the math, which I believe is literally just the amount of characters in here. I believe actually that's 56, so it's adding a couple more. So I'm not exactly sure how it's coming out with 58, but Yeah, it's doing the math for us, thankfully, because if you don't have this right, a lot of servers will not accept your request. Okay, let's see. We have the target. So what am I missing? Post. No such file or directory open. So what is it? Okay, first of all, I like this. It's a 200, which means the server understands what our message, and but it's just saying no such file. But it's giving us a clue that it's looking in the temporary directory on the server. So that's because we're doing this out of order. So what I mean by that is it's going to require 2 post requests, and I'll tell you why. So if we go over here and create another one, okay, and I'm just going to grab this, copy, paste it, and good. Look at that, auto populates. That's nice. So now I'm going to go to this other endpoint. Okay, so let's talk about the other endpoint for a second. So remember, this is the endpoint that our robot friend told us, the set company logo, another post request, and we have to get through its little minor filtering. So the way it's validating, okay, is again, make sure it's not empty and make sure it fits our format, okay? And then if it all matches, it's going to do this next function, which is a write file sync. Oh, before that, it's going to fetch to this endpoint, this image URL, which is unfiltered, which means I could reach out to the internet anywhere, right? Because let me back up. Look at the first filter. Is it a valid URL? Okay. And this is what it's checking on our image URL. And the way it validates it, all it has to either start with an HTTP or an HTTPS. So I could literally go anywhere on the internet and this would be a valid image URL. It's not checking even if it's a valid image. I mean, I could do all sorts of things. Okay, but the goal here is to try to access the local server. So I just wanted to call out that logic. So what else do we need? We need this image URL. Okay. That's going to be the second JSON. Okay. So the way we do that, okay, is again the syntax. Okay. And then we just have to fill these in. So first one is image URL, and the second one's going to be wherever we want. So let's just use an example, like literally, we'll just use an example. And yeah, I'll even do this over HTTPS just to really drive home the point that we can go anywhere we want. So yeah, that looks good to me. Yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and do this, send it, and we get an okay. Okay, so now we can go between these two. Now, if we go back here, look at this. It went out and grabbed it. Okay, how do we know that it grabbed it? Well, there it is, example domain. This domain is for use in illustrative examples in documents. So there we go. There's our proof of concept. So now our goal is to access what? Inside the server. So we're given a hint here. And if you know anything about like your own server, if you ever set up your own server, like a Python server, that's always considered either localhost or 127.0.0.1, right? That's the hacker's home, right? So we can use that combined with this internal port. I mean, this is the theory, right? And use HTTP because that's the other filter. And we should technically be able to grab it because it doesn't care. we're meeting the conditions of the logic, right? So let's do that. Let's we can do this either way. We can do it like no place like hacker home. Now, we got to do the port, okay? And we're giving it there. And then the final thing we need to give it is the endpoint, right? Which is this CRM users. All right. And now we're just setting a get request. Oops, do that with 1//. Okay, crossing our fingers. We get an okay. Now let's go back, hit the send, and what's there? Whoa, payday. Do you see what I see? I see a bunch of sensitive information, user data. So we were successful. So okay, so let's talk about like what just happened here. Like if we were going to talk to C-suite and talk about the dev, talk to the dev team, like, you know, how do you explain it to them? And then even more importantly, how do you fix this? Okay, so clearly this all boils down to inadequate user input, right? We're just being too trusty on the client side. We're letting anything goes, on the client side, on the the end user can literally manipulate requests, as we clearly saw. The JSON body can be manipulated, and we could do much worse than this. I would imagine we could even get a reverse shell on this server if they didn't have it firewalled. But so how do you? Okay, so that's the overall problem: inadequate user input. How do you fix it? Where would you tighten it up? Well, I like allow lists. So what's an allow list? An allow list is just simply, hey, there's only a few things that I will allow on my server as places that we can grab these images from, for instance. How about this? I don't want any traffic on HTTP at all. It's insecure, first of all. Why? So that shouldn't even be. We shouldn't even. That shouldn't even be in here at all. They should all be coming from trusted public sources. Okay. Now, the other thing is okay. What are we actually doing here? We're getting company logos. So maybe only have one. There's only one trusted site out there that you've already vetted. Maybe there's 3. Maybe there's 5. Whatever it is, that's in your allow list. So you've got a handful of company logo images all on secure HTTP, and that's in your allow list. And so this becomes the new filter. Hey, if the traffic's coming from my favorite list of logo servers, let it through and get rid of this completely. There's absolutely no reason to be using this protocol. Would you agree? And that automatically eliminates any potential access to our local server. Okay, so that's how I would fix that. Now this particular UUID format, this regex, I think it's okay. But if I wanted to improve it, here's my idea. Instead of it matching a pattern, because let's say you have API documentation, or somehow this gets out, which is possible, right? Whether it's a GitHub repo or someone makes a doc and it becomes public. Instead of pattern matching, one better would be whatever's in this crm.mjs is literally a series of UUIDs. So that's what it should be matching on. If it's in that dictionary of UUIDs on my server or on my, on my logo list, my customer list, then and only then will you be allowed to go further. So that's how I would do it. I would get rid of the pattern and I would make it, it has to be an exact match. So that would be my remediation advice to the dev team, to the business. And I hope you learned something.